Hello, good morning. Alive, everybody.
Tomorrow, after bonfire. No barbecue.
In the preparation for the coming bonfire, we will have the first talk of today's morning session by Twardoch and Marcin Woliński in alphabetic order, designing a scientific journal on the example of journal of language modeling. So there will be modeling a journal for language modeling. Yeah, some such. Okay, the floor is yours, please, and keep us in, please.
Okay, so the topic of this talk is a new journal that we started publishing at my institute, Institute of Computer Science in Warsaw. I will pass a few topics for you to... let's start by thinking, what does it take to publish a scientific journal? So, the main ingredient in such a journal is peer reviews. If it is to be scientific, it has to be reviewed. Typically, it's done in so-called double-blind review, so that the reviewer does not know names of the authors, and the authors do not know who reviews them. A journal has an editorial board, and the board assigns reviewers to articles. Typically, each article is read by 3 people. So this stage, so this stage is done by scientists, and when the article is accepted, it is passed to the publisher, who is supposed to do proofreading, typesetting, copy editing, printing, and to distribute printed copies. So, is that what really happens today? Well, not really. If we think about publishers such as Elsevier or Springer, first of all, nowadays they expect the scientists to give them typeset, to do the typesetting. They expect us to send them ready to print PDF files. So that again is done by the authors, in fact. Do publishers nowadays do proofreading? Not really. You cannot expect them to spot any typos in your paper or something like that, and moreover, so for copy editing. The fact is that the only things the publishers do, well, at least it's my experience with Springer. They want us to send them PDF files, and they will just print them. Lately they started to well, it's typically prepared with text, so they expect us to send them source files also, and lately they have some strange idea how bibliography should work, so should look in their papers, and they started messing around with it. So the only thing nowadays they do is they spoil your bibliography. If you have some non-ASCII characters in authors' names, they will spoil them completely and send the spoiled file again to you to do the proofreading. So this is the situation with journals that are supposed to be printed on paper. But do we scientists nowadays really need them to print that on paper? Not really. And if we and if the thing is not printed on paper, the problem of distribution goes away.
Publisher is taking money.
We can make the papers available on the internet, and it's only a change of mind what is needed to have a scientific journal. Well, you see, do we really need publishers? Of course, I mean such publishers are working in the way Springer does at the moment. Well, no, we don't. So, anyway, the important work is in fact done by scientists, and our feeling is what publisher does is just taking money from us. So, so what we see lately is what we see implemented is the idea of open access in scientific publishing. The main thing here is that the papers are to be available for the readers for free. There are many variants possible. First of all, we have question what the readers can do with the text. So, what is called gratis open access means only that you can read the text, and something called libre open access means that you can do more things with the text. For example, the text may be made available on a Creative Commons license, and then you can recycle parts of the text, use it in some ways. Under some conditions, you are allowed to use that text, for example, well, you translate or use parts of it in your lecture or something like that. And if we talk about money, there is also the question of authors paying for the text being published. So sometimes they have to pay, sometimes they do not. It depends on the publisher. So in this context, we decided to start publishing a new journal called Journal of Language Modeling. My domain is natural language processing, so that's what this journal is what's its topic. And I think I said it at the beginning. The Institute of Computer Science and, in fact, Linguistic Engineering Group, as my group is called.
Linguistic engineering, that's, you know, if you think about the contents of those words, then...
Yeah, I know. And the acronym is funny as well, I know. So the journal is, well, okay. We use double-blind peer reviews. All the papers are available on the internet for free, and there is no cost for authors as well. So, well, it's a completely free journal. Funny thing about it is that papers appear on the website as soon as they are accepted. So they go through the review and from the layout. And when a paper is ready, it's placed on the web page. And when we accumulate a few of the papers, or in fact twice a year, an issue is officially closed, and we say that, well, we have a new issue of the journal. It's not done yet, but we want to make the journal available via print on demand for, you know, some libraries like to be able to put the journal on the shelf and show them to the readers. So some people want to have it printed. So that's our goal. We used something named Open Journal Systems for managing the work on the journal. It's an open source system that takes care of this process of reviews and how the files go to the author and back and to the layout editor and so on. The production process looks something like that. First of all, there are several rounds of reviews possible. If the reviewers say, well, that's not a very bad paper, but I'd like them to change that and that, that information can go back to the authors. They have to change the text, and then the reviewer sees it again. So there are possible several rounds. And when the article is accepted, the author has to send text sources, well, in fact, to put them in that journal management system. Then some copy editing takes place on our side. Then the text goes to someone called layout editor who does the typesetting. And then we have the final stage of proofreading by the author, who accepts the final form of the paper, and then it goes to the website. Here, well, that's a kind of a side note, but we didn't invent a better place to place that slide. Here is what happens in the copy editing stage. For the author has sent to us the file he thinks is final, and we give it to someone who is competent in English to spot some language problems in the text and mark them. So what copy editor does is he or she marks things in text he or she thinks should be changed. This goes back to author, who can accept or reject such changes. The markup in the source file for such a change looks like this. It's minimal markup. So this is the fragment that has to be changed. This is what the copy editor suggests, and if some note is needed, the copy editor can use a command to add a note to such change. Yeah.
I'd like to ask who introduces that, who writes that markup into the document?
Copy editor.
Okay, so they explicitly write this so that the changes are seen.
Yes. So the copy
editor cannot mark the order, the proper order of the word. You can say that it's wrong and. Well,
here the change is in fact a change of word order. Yeah. So you have just you have inserted the word here and deleted the word here.
Redundancy.
Well,
Yes.
we could.
But easy. Correctors usually use numbers.
Yes. Well, my idea in fact was to have just one way of marking it up in the source file, not to require the author to learn several strange markups that express, well, a special markup for changing the order, a special markup for adding a letter, and so on. In fact, we have just one notation that catches that all, and sometimes we have to repeat a word because of that, but well, I think it's easier to understand for the authors. we will see if it works, and in fact we are just testing this. Okay, so I think it's time now for Adam.
Yes, thanks Marcin. So, yeah, the Posław is, this is more or less how I primarily got to learn this. So in my mind, the whole project, because Marcin asked me to help design the publication, and then sent me some initial things, and the word Posław is what was left in my mind. So for me, rather than sort of calling it Journal of Language Modeling, it's yes. So Posław. Why Posław? Well, because the first thing that I received was this. It was an example paper, not a real paper that actually got published, but sort of like a sample content paper, typeset using a standard, more or less standard, or a solution, a class that I think Marcin developed. And there were, and this was basically my first map into what kind of content will there be in the paper. So, of course, we see things like, you know, the title, and the title of the sample paper was Posław, a lexicographic framework for multi-word units. It's a name of an application that was of a computer program that was developed, and this paper was the one that I worked on for many weeks, you know, designing the layout. So, and I find the name very fun. It's a good name actually. So we have a title, we have authors, we have affiliations, which sometimes, like in this case, can be rather complex. That was actually quite good because Marcin sort of, the paper I got had in a fairly small number of pages, a number of sort of difficult situations that might occur. So for instance here, this is more or less the most complex map of affiliations, where you have two institutions, and you have some people who are in two institutions, some who are only in one, and that's sort of kind of like a space-saving way with the superscripts. So this was, of course, there were some keywords, there was an abstract, and the general structure, such as here we have, you know, some headings, we have some illustrations, illustrations that have captions, and this over here we have a couple of subheadings. So we have the first order headings, we have the second order headings, and we have the third order headings, at least here in the sample. And then I looked at, you know, what do other scientific papers in that field look like. So this is an older paper from an older journal from 1995 by Elsevier, Artificial Intelligence. You know, all based in Times New Roman and sort of very plain. There is another journal of machine learning research, and I looked at about 6 or 7 different publications. This is another one, Association for Computational Linguistics, from some journal. I'm not sure what the journal's title is, but
Computational Linguistics.
Oh, Computational Linguistics. Okay. That's using some variant of Palatino, I believe. So this is what I got, and then sort of I started the Posław 2 project to actually designing the first Posław that I got from Marcin. This pale red means that it's from this, because I will show it later as well, from the sample content that I created. I basically took the PDF that Marcin gave me. I used a plugin called PDF to ID to convert it to InDesign, and I worked in InDesign. So this was the first sort of take on my typesetting. You can see that there are the authors, and my idea was, which well didn't work out, but one of the ideas was to move the references, the affiliations to the margin as much as the keywords. So the idea was that it was okay. We have the subheadings. That there would be a sort of more or less classical design, which is, based on centered headings, and the main column and all the headings are sort of centered, and in addition there are notes on the margins if necessary. And I also developed a second sort of variant. So this was called the classic design, and this was the modern design, which you can see that this is, as I said, all centered, and the headings are serif typeface, and this is left aligned, and the headings are sans serif. So the basic typeface is the same. This is these here, sans serif with a bit more weight. So, and also the left alignment, this sort of gave a little bit more of a modern look, and the other one was a bit more classical. And in the end, the editorial board, or the editors, or the powers to be, decided that this was sort of a better starter. So I started working with Marcin back and forth on the volume 0 issue 1, which is exactly the 3 copies that are being circulated are the results from of this process. So first I created a design spec, and that sort of encompassed the general layout. I've identified and tried to describe how to deal with the main page objects, and I will discuss them in a minute. And then I defined how to deal with typography in many cases, and the title page of each article received like a special treatment because it had the most sort of varying and important information. And then, the technological process of this was that I prototyped the designs in Adobe InDesign. I created the specs. I've described the specs actually then in Google Docs, which I then I sent the information to Marcin. Marcin implemented it in XeLaTeX, and I think, if implemented is actually a little bit, it says it's a little bit little, because actually Marcin really did a lot of very conscious design work, because some of my information or my specs were rather sketchy, and he interpreted them greatly and actually suggested some ideas here and there in situations that I didn't cover. So I was very happy to actually work with somebody who has typographic experience and actually some good taste, and also is competent about tech, and is also competent about context. So PDF was the output format, and we used open source fonts. So this is what my first working environment was. This was InDesign, and I created a grid, and I placed everything on the grid and sort of experimented with some different parameters. This is the baseline grid was sort of like the foundation or actually it's a square grid. So grid. So there is a vertical grid, and there is also a horizontal grid that the entire design is based on. And that was the first sort of conscious decision that I tried to make, is to come up with a grid system which worked so that the whole page could be divided into an integer number of grid units, and that the grid units could be a bit flexible. So if we at some point decided to change the format, that it would be fairly easy to do so. So when we met in Warsaw, we were trying to figure out what would be the best basic grid unit. And since I've learned that what is it, small point?
Scale.
Oh, scale point. Sorry, the scale point in tech is sort of the tiniest unit of measurement that you can use, which is it's divided 1 inch divided into 65. No. Yeah. Okay. No, it's yeah.
That's one point, typographical point according to Knut.
Right.
Okay, and then
It's divided by 65,000. Yeah. So basically, I decided this is a great unit because I can do some nice calculations, and I came up with sort of what I wanted to get, more or less, was somewhere around 13 points for the basic grid line for the baselines, and also in the vertical, and that came to be the 895 SPs, and that's so. First, we wanted to just I wanted just to do a grid unit, which everything else would be based on. And then I decided, well, maybe it would be safer to separate the x and the y, even though in this case, right now, it's square, so it's the same in the horizontal and in the vertical. But if we keep them separate, we would be able to change, for instance, to make the entire layout a bit narrower if needed by just changing the definition of the x grid unit. XU and YU, as we call them. So this is how they're defined in tech, and this is what I like so much, is that basically everything else would then be based on these, and not on millimeters and points and fractions and sort of working a lot. So then we decided, this was the destination PDF media size, and by sort of rounding a little bit, I decided that the entire design size would be based on these grid units. So it's 35 X grid units and it's 50 Y grid units. So then I started creating sort of like specs, design specs for how the page should behave. And this is the vertical direction definition. So we have the top empty area, and that's 3 grid units, and then the running headers is 1 grid unit, 1 grid unit separator, 38 grid units for the contents, and then 2 grid units separator, 1 grid units footer, and 4 grid units the empty bottom area. And then in the X direction, the inside margin is 4 grid units, the outside margin is actually 2 grid units, but then there is a sidebar which is 5 grid units, so altogether in most cases the outside margin would be 2 and 5 and 1, no, 2 I think as well. And then here, for titles, for the main text, we had all sort of heights and widths defined in the grid, and this is what the main text would look like. So we would have the main text here, we would have the running header, the footer, and the sidebar, which would take some content if needed, and I'll show more examples of that in a minute. And then this is how it was then defined in tech. So the dimensions that were the XGU and YGU that were defined at the beginning were then used in the paper size and in the class definition for XeLaTeX. Yeah, maybe you can.
I'd like to say about it. When you do such things with geometry, we shouldn't set text height to what is the number of units we should use? 38, I think. Because then you will have problems with top skip and other strange parameters, text parameters. The nice way to specify that for geometry is to state that you want to have 38 lines of text on the page, and then the geometry will set top skip and the text height and whatever to sensible values, so that 38 lines of text really fits on the page. Which is not the case if you say set the text height to 38 baselines.
So then we had to deal with illustrations, and this is more or less, so this is my text part of the spec. It was, so it's just, you know, this is a quotation from what I've written there in the spec. One of the flexible horizontal layouts needs to be applied depending on the amount of text and the proportions of the image. So there I basically, I produced a couple of modules and basically left it to Marcin in this case to actually apply one of these modules to each of the images accordingly. So these were the possible layouts for the images. So either for very large images they would take the entire width, or the main page width and a short sidebar, or if the caption is sort of still fairly short but the table is proportioned so that this combination would be best, then it would be used. If an illustration would be very vertical, for example, then it would make sense to make it so huge, it would make sense to use just this width or with this width, and then of course extend it downwards, and then the caption could take more space. So it was, so we sort of tried to create a system where the balance between the proportions of the image, if the image is very horizontal, this one would be used. If the image was rather vertical, one of the narrower one would be used. And see which one makes sense. So basically, you know, in some cases probably try one or the other and see, is it too large, is it sensible, so that we would get a somewhat lively view. And this is how, maybe you can just very briefly.
Well, we have just introduced a LaTeX command that specifies which of the layouts is to be used. They are numbered from 0 to 5, and
yes, and so this is like a straightforward, you know, implementation of the spec that I made. And then we came to fonts. So fonts were, of course, actually the fonts were my initial choice, or the choice about fonts was for me the most important one, because I felt that it sort of all stands and falls on fonts and typography. So I started with Charis, then I made a special version of it, and I'll talk about the fonts a little bit. Then for headings we used Play for Display, and then for monospaced or sans serif we used Cuisine or Open Sans. All of them except I think Open Sans are open sourced on the OFL license, and Open Sans is I think Apache 2. And they're all sourced, well, okay, so this is the typography, the basic typography definition. So the main font is actually Charis, SIL compact, for most sizes. For the small sizes, 6 to 8 points, it's a special version, it's Charlotte Small, and for smaller than 6 points, it's it's another special version for even smaller text, Charlotte XS. I will show a comparison and why these differ a bit later. Monospaced fonts, it's scaled by 92%, so because all these fonts had slightly different X heights and slightly different proportions, I tried to come up with a scaling that made them equal to the X height. But I think we decided that still the monospace is still a bit too big, and I think we'll make it slightly smaller. The sans, again, 90% of the basic size, but and then for things like small caps, some letter spacing, and that was all specified. And okay, so Charter, or Charis actually, was my conscience choice because it's actually a great typeface. One of, I think, I would say typographically probably the most interesting open source text typeface that exists, and it was designed not under the name of Charis by the great Matthew Carter, who I personally consider the best typeface designer of the 20th century, who still is active, actually also 21st, but actually the most prolific and the most interesting. I personally view him sort of as a far greater typeface designer than Frutiger or Zapp, because he's just the most universal one. This is an image of Adrian Frutiger and Mike Parker, who was the director of Mergenthaler Linotype in New York, together with Matthew Carter. This is what his friend Steve Zaffarana drew of him when they were working together at Bitstream. And well, this is just a very short sort of overview of the typefaces that Matthew designed. And he designed a lot of text typefaces, also basically ventured in every possible genre of typeface design, a lot of serif designs. Georgia, of course, that was seen previously, which ships with Windows. Then things like Nina and Verdana and Tahoma. New York Times uses his custom typefaces. There were some scripts that he designed, still very successful. And that's Matthew a few years ago in a tram in Helsinki. So one of his most interesting typeface designs, I felt, was Charter. Charter, which was published by Bitstream in 1989. It was designed in 1988. This was a little leaflet that Bitstream published. This was the original character set. Interestingly, at that time Matthew wasn't sure how long the organic should be, so he actually designed two versions of the organic. All of the other glyphs have one version, but the organics have two versions, because he wasn't quite sure. But it shows his attention to detail and his sort of interest in actually providing a very consistent quality throughout the typeface. So this was the original character set of Charter, and well, the way it came actually to being was that the developers, Bitstream was a new company, and they were making one of the very first companies that actually made digital fonts, and and of course the computer were very slow, and the memory sizes were also very small. So they were struggling with the curved description of complex characters sort of fitting into the small memories of printers, etc. So Matthew thought, okay, maybe I should design a typeface that would be sort of very economical in the terms of the memory footprint. So instead of using lots of curves, he minimized the number of curves and used straight lines as often as possible in his design. And then when he finished the design, he went to the engineers and said, "Oh, I solved your memory problem." What memory problem? Well, the one. So I designed a typeface that is very sort of uses straight lines almost everywhere. He said, "Oh, don't worry about the memory problem. We've got some compression mechanisms, and now everything fits in." So basically, the reason that but it shows Matthew in other cases as well. He started with a sort of technical challenge or technical obstacle, like in the case of the telephone books for Bell. It was the poor paper and the amount of information that needed to go there, and he designed, in case of Verdana, it was low resolution screens. and try to come up with a very, very good design solution that often was actually much better and also usable outside of that context of these original limitations. So this is the case with Charter as well. I think it's a wonderful typeface, and fortunately Bitstream in the, I think, late 90s, they open sourced the basic weights of Charter, and the Linguistic Institute, SIL International, that develops, well, fonts for linguists, and also does a lot of sort of minority language related work. They have a database called Ethnologue, which catalogs all of living languages, including the ones that have 20 speakers in the world. And they also developed the open font license, OFL license, that is now the most popular license for open source fonts. And they have extended Charter, extended this open source version of Charter into Charis. And this is what I've decided to use for JLM. Among others, because, well, it's a journal of language modeling, and there was, you know, some potentially interesting linguistic usages. And Charis SIL has a fairly decent character set. Just the beginning, you know. It's just Cyrillic. Then we have some Greek. Then we have a lot of different kinds of symbols, and so it's a rather extensive character set, focused on sort of humanistic use. So it's not you know, mathematical characters, but it's actually great for linguistic.
It's important that it has Cyrillics and that it has phonetic symbols.
Right, exactly, and it has and it's one of the, and it's also a great design. So, so when we come to, you know, the typography, that was, again, I'm not going to go much into details, but the Y grid unit was the basic one. So the leading, the line height was defined as one Y grid unit, and then all the other sizes were defined as relative to these. So there's of course the regular, then the small text, which is, you know, captions. Oh, by the way, one of the important things also was that I wanted to sort of minimize the different number of font sizes. So there is basically just one body font size and one small text size, and the small text size is what is used in the bibliography, in the footnotes, in the side notes, in the running footers and headers. We're pretty much everywhere. So there are basically just two sizes. There's one that is about 10 points, and then one that is about 8.5. And then monospaced was sort of scaled according to it to match actually visually with this one. Then we have the headings, and this is just the definition from my spec, but I'll show you how it works in some examples. So let's have a look, sort of a look inside the issue. So here again we have, this is from the issue that you have in circulation. This is one of the articles. We have I originally, you know, tried not to have anything in the footer on the first page, but Marcin made the point that since the papers are to be available separately, that the title of the journal, including the volume and the number, should be in the footer of the of the title page. Or I think originally we tried it with a header, but we moved it to the footer because that's sort of less invasive. So we have the Playfair font family as the headings and the first subheads. We have Charis italic here. We have the small size here. We have the keywords, which are typeset on the margin. Then this is from the Toposław sample. This is what I wanted to show. So this is the first order of headings, and what I wanted to do is to have you know, the heading centered, but actually the numbering to be on a side, and also the numbers are always using the same font. The small size body, even though the actual headings change. So the headings here, these are using the flavor, which is sort of more displayish and in small caps. This is the same size as this one. So it's not bigger, it's not bolder, it's just italic. And this is the second grade. And actually something that I think was a bit unorthodox, but and these are the third order headings. And these are actually using the small text size, because if you do have space here, it's very obvious that this stands out, that this is something different. So this again is the same size, and that size is used in all the headings, but here we have just a small size, and just by the using of space we know that it's a heading, and we know that it's a slightly less important heading. And I think third order heading shouldn't be bold anymore, because it's, you know, otherwise you have lots of bold stuff in the middle, like in the examples of, I think, the scientific.
What if heading is longer than one line?
Well, then it's, I think we will have an example of that. Yeah, here we have an example of that. It's just, so basically this stands on the top, and basically the heading can be as long as we'd like to. Here we have, yeah, the heading, we have the indents, so also the indents that are being used are sort of consistent across, and it's 1.5 of the X grid unit. Oh, here we have situations like we have some indented text, and since it's sort of like a special, well, quotation, or sort of like, it's not really a heading, but it's kind of like a question posed by the author that answers. That was left aligned rather than full justified, and with an indent, so it would stand out a little bit and would still sort of make sense typographically. Here we have the usage of the URLs that are typeset in Cousina and the monospace. I think it should be slightly smaller than it is. Here we have, you know, some more interesting cases, like this is the type of content that we would have there, and well, we've been trying to sort of find different solutions for them. Sometimes, you know, needed to invent one. Not all of the solutions are perfect yet, but I'm quite happy with most of them. So this is a little table which doesn't have a caption. This is the bibliography. I originally proposed.
Perhaps on the previous slide,
Oh yeah.
show that last element. It states the license. At the end of each article, we have a note that it is licensed under Creative Commons, well, attribution in that case, but the authors can select which variant of Creative Commons license they want to use for a particular article, and well.
So yeah, references. I'm not really happy with the bibliography, but I still have, it's a bit too much, and I don't really like these small caps, but they apparently prefer them. But I might try to sort of design a better bibliography.
Well, I thought you would say you don't like them, but you didn't.
I didn't like.
In fact, I think we haven't discussed that.
Yeah, well, we didn't have time for everything. I must say. Originally, I had the idea of typesetting the bibliography in 2 columns, but I think you were right to convince me that 1 column would be better. But it's still, of course, it's kind of like it's an interesting challenge, because it's so dense information, and you know, designing it right will really take, I think, some time.
How do you refer to the literature in the by name? Or
Name and year.
This is one of the examples of. So these are 2 tables here, and this one is large, so it's actually taking the entire width, and it has the caption on top. And this is a smaller one, so it only takes the main width, and the caption is on the side, as you can see. This is another situation. We have two illustrations here, and this one is basically set to the full width, and the caption is taking the standard width of the side margin. Well, here we have a slightly narrower image, and the caption is slightly wider, so it's actually sort of creating this slight more interesting interaction with the margins. Here we have again a full table, which is actually a continuation of the previous page, and it's the full width. And here we have the main width, and again a caption on the side. And it's here we have two images where the captions were very long, so they wouldn't really fit very reasonably onto the margins. So they are put below the images. But again, the images take different widths. Here we have an even more interesting situation. We have a wide image with a fairly long caption that is below, and then we have two tables that are actually narrower than the main width, and then the captions that sort of that take slightly more space. So, and this is, I think, one of the features of the design, which I believe makes it a bit livelier without creating, a lot of noise. But it's at least it's a bit less boring that way, I hope. And here we have a little bit of maths. About maths, this is actually typeset, I think, using Cambria, which I'll mention it briefly at the end, because I have an idea regarding Cambria and Charis. But this was a mixture, so okay. So now there's a couple of things that I wanted to take through quickly. So this is just the evolution of the cover. It was my original design, and then I asked Łukasz to help me with it. So we sort of went back and forth, but then we arrived at that one that I sort of, with the red that I wanted, but actually with lots of very sensible input from Łukasz. I'm very grateful that he helped me as well, including this, because this is something that I wanted to put there. I wanted to have like a nice little signet or monogram. So I drew one JLM in FontLab Studio, but I'm rather terrible at drawing shapes. I more or less I called it like a prototype, and then I sent it to Łukasz, and Łukasz drew it properly. So once again, thank you very much. And this is the monogram in sort of two versions, and it's used inside and on the cover. Now, Charis and Charlotte. So this is the Charis, the characters from the basic character set, and we know. I mean, tech users know about optical scaling. So for the purposes, I took Charis and I basically made two optical versions of it. Well, I think the small one is a bit too bold. Maybe I need to take a look at it again. I think it is. So. So this is the original one, and this is the Charlotte S for small, and this is the Charlotte XS for extra small, which I think is the bold, so it will need to go or be revised. And I did this through a complex combination of interpolations and some other operations, which I'm not going to talk about in detail. This is Charis and Cambria, and this is actually the interesting bit, because Charis, or originally Charter, I believe that when Microsoft commissioned Jelle Bosma to design Cambria, which is the big mathematical font that is used in Office these days, that actually it was somewhat inspired by Charter. It's not like a straight, copy or anything, but it follows a certain design patterns, in the italic less, but in the Roman more so. So as an idea, I sort of because Cambria is big in mathematics, and Charis is actually very extensive in the linguistic coverage. And this is a comparison. This is a character set combined from Charis, which is in green, and Cambria, which are the characters that are in Cambria and aren't in Charis, are in red. So you can see that there are some things missing. For instance, the full Greek, or Optic or old Cyrillics, and some of the characters that are present in Cambria. Again, Greek mostly. And then a lot of technical symbols and mathematical symbols that are present in Cambria and are not included in Charter or Charis. And that is something that I would love to see sort of happen as a possible font project, and that is extending Charis to become a very worthy open source font, not only for linguistic typesetting or publishing, but also for mathematical typesetting. Because I think, again, Charis is just a fantastic design. It's made by a very competent designer. It's a good sort of reading. It has good reading qualities. And it already has been designed greatly by SIL. So this is something that I sort of keep in mind, and then this is an example of the original Charis, and then Cambria, and then a font that I quickly produced, of course, by some trickery, that is the design of Charis matching the widths of Cambria. And you can see it's slightly different color, because this is sort of more, it has more wider spaces, etc. This is the Cambria, and this is the fake Cambria using Charis, but it shows that it sort of goes hand by hand. And then one last thing, the Playfair typeface used in the headings. Of course, it really looks best in large sizes, because it was designed by great Danish designer Claus Egger Sørensen, who actually was my student in Reading once, and he published it as an open source font with financial support by Google, and it's a very nice typeface. So I was happy to use it in the headings. Unfortunately, Marcin sent me this picture showing that this is how it prints, and that sort of led into uncovering that the very popular tool for auto-hinting TrueType fonts, which is being developed by Werner Lemberg, an open source project, TTF AutoHint, triggers bugs in certain rasterizers that are hard-coded in printers. So there's a lot of stuff going on now about trying to fix this, but as a short-term fix, I had to basically use a different auto-hinter on the copy of Playfair that Marcin used. So in the end, it isn't quite 100% open source yet, because that font isn't really like an official fork, and I haven't forked it properly using a different name, etc. It was a bit of a hack, but it was really fixing a technical problem.
It looks nice.
No, I mean, after that, yeah, it looked better. No, it was actually, if you're interested in the bugs, I can tell you later what it was. Okay, so this is, I think, conclusion, questions. Well, we have 30 seconds, so if there are questions, I would suggest...
2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. So, are there any questions?
Questions? Question time. Have it?
Yeah. Thank you for that. You put a lot of work into design, and very few publishers even know anything about typography, so this is good. But I think I don't know, right at the start you're talking about what publishers do. I think that's incorrect. You were saying they don't do copy editing, they don't do typesetting, they don't do they do all of those. Perhaps you've been talking to sometimes the conference proceedings, they just get PDF and print those. But we work for publishers, and everything on your list, they do that and more. They take files, they copy edit them, they send it back to proofreading, they reformat to their specification, and very importantly, they produce XML, full XML. So